Jane Addams, social worker, peace activist, and champion of equality. I am ecstatic to share about Jane Addams this week because she has been one of my personal role models and heroes since I first read about her when I was 16. My name is Megan Valier, and this video chronicles the life and contributions of one of America's most forward-thinking leaders on peace and equality. Early life and work at Hull House. An understanding of Addams' contribution to American foreign policy and international relations begins with her early life, education, and professional goals. Addams was born in 1860, a child of the Civil War, to a politically and financially well-off family in Illinois. Her father was engaged in Illinois state politics as a supporter of Abraham Lincoln's U.S. Senate campaign. Jane Addams received her bachelor's degree at Rockford Female Seminary and thus was among a small group of educated, middle-class white women living through the American Reconstruction and Industrial Age. She was extremely close with her father and suffered a several years bout of sickness and depression upon his death in 1881. She traveled on and off during this time, and during one trip to Europe in particular, she visited the Toynbee Hall Settlement House in London. Inspired by her own Christian morality and the educational and cultural impact of this settlement on the surrounding slums of London, Addams worked alongside her longtime friend Ellen Gates Starr to co-found a settlement house of their own, the Hull House, in Chicago's 19th Ward. Her work at the Hull House served as a foundation for Addams's later ideas on cosmopolitan internationalism and pacifism. Her and Starr's settlement assisted a poor immigrant community, where college-educated women, like herself, served people from all backgrounds and many ethnicities, promoting health, education, economic justice, trust, community, and togetherness. She witnessed at the Hull House the ability of people from countless nationalities to build a truly cross-national cosmopolitan community right in the heart of Chicago. She wrote that her neighbors were there, quote, living in the kingdom of human kindness and laying the simple and inevitable foundations for an international order. Democracy and equality. Beginning at Hull House, all of Addams's work focused on democracy broadly defined. She found that those who suffered the most were those from whom we could learn the most, and she valued building trust through humility. Her work was not about charity, but about empowerment for the oppressed. The pragmatist philosophy to which she subscribed and contributed explains her belief in bringing together a diverse set of people who find a more substantive and complete truth of the world based on the lived experiences of the oppressed. Her conceptions of local, national, and international democracy started with equality in social relationships. As such, she championed racial justice as a founding member of the NAACP, civil liberties as a co-founder of the ACLU, women's rights as a suffragette, and economic justice as a strong supporter of unions and organized labor. While she could not advocate for LGBT rights at the time, she has since been inducted into the Chicago LGBT Hall of Fame, and her contributions to discussions about racial and economic equality as a queer woman have since been widely recognized. The Women's Peace Party, the International Congress of Women, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and the Nobel Peace Prize. Jane Addams was deeply troubled by the destruction of both the Spanish-American War and World War I, and served as a domestic advocate for peace as a co-founder of the United States Women's Peace Party. Addams was one of over 1,000 women who traveled to The Hague in 1915 to discuss a peaceful end to the Great War in Europe. She served as the president of this International Congress of Women and later the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Most striking were her progressive contributions to the importance of human dignity in international affairs. The resolutions that came out of The Hague under her leadership called for an immediate end to the Great War, a women's conference to craft practical peace settlements at the end of the war, permanent peace arrangements including arbitration and democratic control of foreign policy, the immediate enfranchisement of all women, international cooperation through a conference of nations such as the League of Nations, civil and political equality, general disarmament, the education of all children in the ways of peace, and the participation of women in peace settlement. Long before the international human rights regime had taken a hold, Addams's work in the International Congress of Women and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom reflected her belief in the supremacy of human dignity over state sovereignty. She argued for a cosmopolitanism in which all people are connected, regardless of race, sex, class, or nationality, and as all behave as global neighbors engaged in the daily practices of life-sustaining activities. These views were heavily influenced by her experiences watching immigrant communities come together at the Hull House. Moreover, Addams's ideas of peace stood in direct opposition to many of her contemporaries who argued that peace was a simple absence of war. Addams advocated for a positive peace that incorporates social justice and bottom-up democratic engagement. She argued that peace cannot stem from the mere absence of war, but instead that it requires incorporating and respecting human rights, human dignity, and democratic dialogue at international, national, and subnational levels. For her peace activism, Addams became the first woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 1931. The maternal rhetoric of pacifism, bridging femininity, domesticity, and foreign affairs. Though she has been criticized by some contemporary feminist scholars for her maternal rhetoric, Jane Addams expertly connected her belief in women's equality to calls for cosmopolitan internationalism and women's involvement in foreign affairs. Addams often used language of domesticity to bring women together to advocate for suffrage and peace. One metaphor she used was that of women engaging in government and politics as housekeepers, but her idea of a housekeeper was one of a pre-industrial woman who had many talents and was responsible for education, production, health, and societal improvement. Her argument was not that women be housekeepers in the domestic sense, but instead serve as custodians of their communities. Her argument was not that women were better or worse than men or essentially different from them, but rather that their lived experiences were unique and valuable. Their experiences as mothers, caretakers, and social workers offered unexplored perspectives in the areas of international relations and peacekeeping. Indeed, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom emphasized that women are especially well poised to contribute to peace settlement, given their lived experiences as nurturers and caretakers of children and the poor. Progressive infighting and Addams's unique contributions. Most of Addams's contemporaries in the progressive camp were anti-war, but she took her pacifism to an extreme that earned her scorn and contempt from none other than Teddy Roosevelt, the media, and even the U.S. government. Addams, unlike many other activists at the time, was extremely critical of U.S. entry into World War I. Other progressives, such as Teddy Roosevelt, argued that U.S. involvement was necessary to subdue the conflict and bring lasting peace to Europe. Roosevelt specifically commented that Addams's unwavering pacifism was foolish. The press and others claimed that her peace activism during wartime made her a traitor and publicly shamed her. Indeed, because of her international activism and name recognition, the U.S. government actively monitored and surveilled her for her pacifism during this time. She remained steadfast because she firmly believed that violent means could never be used to pursue peaceful ends. War, she posited, makes people think in terms of binaries, such as friend or enemy, and good or evil, which undermines the pragmatist project of realizing that knowledge and truth are contingent rather than fixed. Moreover, she adamantly believed that humans, by their very nature, are built to help one another and live in community, and that the violence of war and the warrior ethos detracted from our natural, congenial internationalism. Her belief in the goodness of human nature obviously stands in stark contrast with realist conceptions of international relations. Addams's ideas about positive peace, democratic cosmopolitanism, and learning from and empowering the oppressed were truly groundbreaking during her time. She saw in human nature a capacity for love and community even during militarized conflict and in the presence of deep sociological and economic barriers to equality for women and minorities. She saw a special place for women in foreign affairs and peacekeeping, and her unwavering optimism continues in the legacies of each of the groups of which she was a part.